Would you believe me if I told you there's a hotel room that erases people from existence? Not just kills them, not just hides their bodies, but erases them completely, as though they had never been born. No records, no memories, no trace that they were ever part of the world at all. The first time I heard the story, I laughed it off as another piece of urban legend folklore, one of those creepy tales that bounce around on internet forums, designed to keep teenagers awake at night. But then the names started showing up, names I could cross-check, names I remembered reading about in old newspapers that now no longer existed in any archives. That was when I realized the legend of Greystone Hotel wasn't a story. It was a warning. The Greystone Hotel sits in the heart of a city that pretends not to notice it. A crumbling relic of the early 1900s, its stone facade streaked with soot and rain, the building looks like it should have been condemned decades ago. Most of the upper windows are dark, but the neon sign over the door still flickers on at dusk, buzzing faintly like an insect caught in a glass jar. I first visited on a cold November afternoon, mist rolling off the river nearby, when the entire block seemed unnaturally quiet. Even the traffic thinned out as though drivers instinctively avoided this stretch of road. Standing before the hotel, I felt a prickle run up the back of my neck, the kind of instinct you try to rationalize but can't. Inside, the lobby was a museum of faded grandeur. High ceilings with plaster crumbling in patches, a chandelier that swayed gently though there was no draft, and a check-in desk manned by a clerk who looked like he belonged in an old black and white film. His suit was pressed, but the cuffs were frayed, and his smile was a little too practiced. The strangest thing, though, was the silence. Even with the chandelier's crystals clinking, the desk bell occasionally ringing, the lobby felt muffled, as though sound itself was reluctant to linger here. I had come prepared, of course. As a journalist who made his living investigating fringe stories, I had a folder full of research, printouts, old microfilm copies, even screenshots from sites that had mysteriously vanished days after I'd read them. The common thread was always the same: guests who checked into room 6 never checked out. Worse, their existence seemed to vanish with them. Families forgot them. Workplaces had no record of their employment. Birth certificates faded from files. When pressed, people who once knew them would frown and say, "I don't think I ever knew anyone by that name." The most chilling part was that I had one name in my notes that no longer existed anywhere: Eleanor Voss. I'd seen her obituary once, years ago, after she supposedly died in a car accident. But when I tried to find it again, it was gone. I asked her sister for comment, and the woman looked at me like I was insane. "I don't have a sister," she said flatly, her eyes blank. Yet I remember Eleanor. I remember the photograph that accompanied the obituary. Which meant either I was losing my mind, or something was actively rewriting reality. The clerk's voice broke my thoughts. "Checking in?" His tone was pleasant, but his eyes never blinked. I nodded, sliding the reservation slip across the counter. I had booked specifically for room 6, though I'd been told it was permanently closed to guests. The slip confirmed my request, and to my surprise, the clerk didn't even hesitate. His long fingers traced the number, and a faint smile played at the corner of his lips. "Room 6, he said, as though savoring the words. He turned the key toward me. An actual brass key, not a plastic card. 3rd floor. End of the left corridor. The key was cold when I picked it up, unnaturally so, like it had been kept in ice. I pocketed it and thanked him, though my voice cracked. As I walked toward the elevator, I felt his eyes on me the entire way, a gaze heavy enough to bow my shoulders. The elevator doors opened with a reluctant creak, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 3rd floor. The ascent was slow, the elevator groaning as though it hadn't been serviced in decades. The flickering light overhead buzzed, and for a moment I thought I heard whispers beneath the sound of grinding gears. The 3rd floor corridor was long and dim, lined with faded carpet that had once been red but was now a muddy brown. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and several of the doors bore tarnished brass numbers. Room 6 waited at the very end, its number plate gleaming more brightly than the others, as though freshly polished. The closer I came, the heavier my steps felt, like I was wading through thick water. By the time I stood before the door, my chest was tight, and my palms were damp with sweat. I hesitated, pressing my ear against the wood. No sound. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. Just silence, deep and suffocating. Slowly, I slid the key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, and the door swung inward with a soft creak. At first glance, the room seemed utterly ordinary. A neatly made bed with a threadbare comforter. A nightstand with an old-fashioned lamp. A dresser with a mirror above it. The air smelled faintly of dust and something metallic, like blood diluted in water. I set my bag down, took a slow breath, and reminded myself that I had faced stranger things in my career. But even as I tried to convince myself, the room felt wrong. Not in any obvious way, but in the way the shadows clung too long to the corners, and the way the mirror reflected the room a half-second too late. I sat on the bed, pulling out my notebook to jot down observations. But the moment my pen touched paper, the overhead light flickered. When it steadied, I froze. My handwriting, just seconds old, was gone. The page was blank. I looked up slowly, heart thudding against my ribs. In the mirror across from me, my reflection was still writing. The journalist has checked into room 6 and already experienced the first signs of its impossible reality, his notes vanishing while his reflection lags behind, continuing the motion he just stopped. The silence inside room 6 was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the kind of quiet that comes when the world outside is muted, it was an active silence, as if the air itself swallowed every sound I tried to make. My breathing felt muffled, the scratching of my pen produced no noise at all, and even the soft groan of the bed springs when I shifted my weight seemed to vanish before reaching my ears. That unnatural quiet made the room feel less like a physical space and more like a sealed chamber, a place separated from the natural laws that govern the rest of the hotel. I sat there, frozen, staring at my notebook, watching as the words I had written faded into the paper until it was blank once more. And yet, in the mirror, my reflection was still bent over, still scribbling furiously, its movements frantic, as though it knew something I did not. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. The mirror's reflection looked up half a second later, slow, delayed, unnatural. Its eyes met mine through the glass, and I swear I saw the faintest flicker of a smile tug at the corner of its lips, an expression I was not making. I stumbled back, hitting the edge of the bed, and the reflection instantly straightened to match me again, perfectly synchronized now, as though it had corrected whatever glitch had exposed it. My throat was dry, my hands clammy, but I grabbed my phone, desperate to record something, anything that could serve as proof. Yet when I opened the camera, the screen was black. Not even static, not even the faintest glow of light. Just endless black. The lens refused to capture the room at all, as if it wasn't there. The unease deepened with every passing minute. I checked the drawers, the nightstand, the closet, ordinary, all of them. The bed sheets smelled faintly of mildew. The dresser drawers stuck slightly when I pulled them open. But the mirror was wrong. Every time I glanced at it, my reflection seemed a fraction of a second late. A subtle delay, but consistent, unshakable. I draped the blanket over it, trying to block its surface, and felt a momentary relief. But when I turned away and looked back again, the blanket was folded neatly on the chair, and the mirror stood uncovered, gleaming faintly in the dim light. I hadn't moved it. As the hours dragged on, I grew painfully aware that I wasn't just alone in the room, I was being watched. Shadows shifted slightly in corners when I wasn't looking at them directly, and the air carried a faint, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. The silence became oppressive, pressing against my ears until I almost wished for noise, any noise, to break the tension. That was when I heard it, a soft knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate raps. I froze. My first instinct was to call out, to ask who it was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I crept toward the door, pressing my ear to the wood. Nothing. I waited a long moment before slowly opening it. The hallway was empty, stretching long and dim, the peeling wallpaper illuminated only by a flickering light at the far end. But the carpet outside my door bore 3 faint indentations, like footprints burned into the fabric. Human footprints. Bare. And they led directly into room 6. When I closed the door again, my heart pounding in my ears, I nearly screamed. Because sitting on the nightstand was a photo that hadn't been there before. A black and white photograph, curled slightly at the edges, depicting the very room I was standing in. The bed. The dresser. The mirror. And on the bed sat a man in old-fashioned clothing, staring directly at the camera with hollow, blackened eyes. His face was pale, almost skeletal, and his hands were folded neatly in his lap. I checked the bed, empty. My pulse thundered. I looked back at the photo. The man was gone from it now. That was the moment I realized the stories were true. This room didn't just swallow people, it erased them, folded them into itself like pages torn from a book. The silence, the vanishing words, the photo, the delayed reflection, it was all part of the same process. I wasn't a guest here. I was prey. I wanted to leave, but something held me back. Not physically, there was no lock on the inside of the door, nothing stopping me from running down the hallway and out of the hotel. But deep in my mind, I felt a weight, a presence, whispering insistently, "Stay. You belong here now." And the terrifying part was, a piece of me agreed. The mirror caught my eye again. This time, my reflection wasn't copying me at all. It was standing, closer to the glass, one hand pressed flat against its surface, its face twisted into a grotesque grin. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, shaking. When I dared to look again, the reflection was normal once more, mimicking my terrified posture on the ground. The delay had returned, but it wasn't late anymore. It was waiting. That was my first night in room 6. And it was only the beginning. The journalist has witnessed room 6 actively manipulating reality, his writing erased, his phone camera useless, photographs appearing from nowhere, and his reflection behaving independently. He knows now that leaving won't be so simple. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night sitting upright against the headboard, my eyes darting constantly between the mirror and the door. The silence pressed against me like a weight, suffocating and thick, and every time I felt myself drifting toward unconsciousness, a subtle shift in the room snapped me back awake, a creak of the floorboards that hadn't been there before, the faint rustle of the bed sheets when I hadn't moved, the sensation of something pacing just outside my field of vision. By dawn, or what I assumed was dawn, I felt hollowed out, raw, and stretched thin, but I couldn't let myself leave. Not yet. Not until I understood what this room was doing. I decided to test the door again. The knob turned easily, and I stepped into the hallway. For the briefest moment, relief surged through me. The dim corridor looked exactly as it had before, wallpaper peeling, faint golden sconces flickering along the walls. But then I noticed something odd. Where the hallway should have opened into the main lobby just a few paces away, it stretched endlessly instead, vanishing into a hazy distance that bent in ways no building should. I glanced behind me to check the door I had just come through. It was gone. There were no doors at all, only endless patterned wallpaper and carpet stretching on in both directions. I tried to keep calm, scribbling notes into my journal as I walked. No end in sight. Hotel corridor appears infinite. Door has vanished. My handwriting shook across the page. The sconces buzzed faintly above, though the sound seemed to bend and fade the farther I went. After what felt like 20 minutes, I realized the hallway was looping. The same water stain on the carpet. The same tear in the wallpaper. The same burned-out sconce. I passed them again and again, as though I were a figure trapped on a spinning reel of film. Panic set in. I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, heart pounding in my chest, but the effect was the same. The hallway repeated itself endlessly, folding in on itself like a Mobius strip. My breaths grew ragged, my body trembling with exhaustion. Finally, I stopped, pressing my back against the wall, forcing myself to inhale deeply. It's an illusion, I whispered to myself. A trick of perception. Stay calm. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was just another shadow, but no, it was a figure, standing at the far end of the corridor. Too far to see clearly, but close enough for me to feel its gaze burning into me. My mouth went dry. The figure didn't move, didn't step forward or back. It just stood, shoulders slumped, head slightly tilted, as if studying me. I blinked, and it was gone. The hallway was empty again, though the air now carried a faint, sour smell, like rotting flowers. I forced myself onward, each step heavy with dread. My notebook trembled in my hands as I scrawled, "Hallway endless." Saw figure. Watching me. But when I looked down again, the page was blank. Worse, the words I had written on earlier pages were fading too, as if the notebook itself was being erased with each step I took. My history, my evidence, it was all dissolving. Then came the voices. Soft at first, like whispers carried on a draft. Snatches of words, broken syllables, and then laughter, childlike, high-pitched, echoing unnaturally through the corridor. My blood turned cold. The laughter was familiar. I had heard it before, years ago, at my grandmother's house. My little sister's laugh, frozen in my memory. But my sister had been dead for over 20 years. I spun around, heart hammering, and for a split second I saw her. She was standing just a few feet away, her hair in the braids she used to wear, her eyes wide and glassy. She smiled, the same innocent smile I remembered, and then she opened her mouth far too wide, unnaturally wide, and a guttural, rasping wail poured out, echoing through the walls until I clapped my hands over my ears. When I blinked, she was gone. I staggered backward, breathless, tears pricking my eyes. The corridor around me shifted as though the building itself were breathing, the walls swelling closer, then pulling apart again, the wallpaper rippling like the surface of water. I stumbled to the floor, clutching at my notebook as if it could anchor me. But when I looked up again, I wasn't in the corridor anymore. I was back in room 6. The bed. The dresser. The mirror. Everything as I had left it. Except now there was something new. A photograph pinned to the wall above the bed. My stomach turned as I stared at it. It was me, standing in the hallway I had just left, my notebook clutched in my trembling hands, my face frozen in terror. Someone, or something, had been there with me, taking that picture. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, unable to look away from the photograph. My breath came in shallow bursts, my skin clammy, my mind screaming with questions I couldn't begin to answer. Who had taken it? How had it gotten here before me? And what did it mean that I was already being catalogued, already becoming part of this room's growing collection? The mirror caught my attention once more. My reflection stood perfectly still, though I was gasping, trembling, on the floor. Its face was calm, serene, and smiling faintly. For the first time, I realized what it was telling me without words: you're not leaving. You never were. The photograph pinned to the wall refused to let me go. Its edges curled slightly, the paper yellowed with age, but the image was sharp, too sharp. Every detail of my terrified expression in that endless hallway was captured in perfect clarity, the notebook in my hand, the strain in my eyes, even the sheen of sweat on my temple. It didn't look like a candid shot. It looked staged, composed, as though the photographer had been inches away, waiting for that precise moment to frame me at my weakest. And yet, I had seen no one. My legs shook as I forced myself upright, and a heavy dread coiled in my stomach. This room was not just swallowing people. It was collecting them. Driven by desperation, I began tearing through the dresser drawers. Dust filled my lungs as I yanked them open one by one, searching for, I don't even know what. Proof, maybe. A clue. Anything that would ground me in reality. In the third drawer, tucked beneath a stack of brittle hotel stationery, I found it. A bundle of photographs bound together with a cracked leather strap. My hands trembled as I pulled them free. Each photograph was of a guest. Men and women, some young, some old. They sat on the bed, stood near the dresser, leaned against the wallpaper. All in room 6. Their expressions varied: confusion, fear, defiance, but one thing was consistent: they were all alone. And they were all staring just slightly off camera, as if someone had instructed them to look away from the lens at the last second. The deeper I went into the stack, the more disturbing the images became. A woman with her mouth stretched too wide, as though screaming, but the photo showed silence. A man with black smudges where his eyes should have been. A child whose outline was blurred, as though he was halfway erased from the frame. And then, at the very bottom, a face I recognized. It was him. The man from the black and white photo that had first appeared on my nightstand. Same hollow eyes, same skeletal face. Only now, he was closer to the camera, his lips curled back in something between a grin and a snarl. And scrawled on the back of the photograph, in uneven, jagged handwriting, were 3 words: "We see you." My stomach twisted. My pulse roared in my ears. I dropped the bundle onto the floor, the photographs scattering like fallen leaves. But the moment they touched the carpet, something impossible happened. Faint whispers rose from them, a low chorus of voices overlapping each other. Some sobbed. Some screamed. Others murmured incoherently. I covered my ears, but the sound wasn't just in the air, it was inside my skull, seeping into me. I scrambled backward until my spine hit the cold plaster wall, eyes locked on the pile of pictures as the voices grew louder, more distinct. And then, a single voice cut through the cacophony. A woman's voice, clear and trembling. "Don't let them take you." I froze, my hands sliding slowly away from my ears. The whispers dulled, collapsing back into an indistinguishable murmur, but those words remained, echoing in my head. "Don't let them take you." Who is she? A former guest? Someone who had resisted? My breath came in ragged gasps, but a tiny spark of determination flickered within me. Someone, or something, had left me that warning. Maybe all wasn't lost. Gathering my nerve, I reached for the photographs again. My fingers barely brushed the top one when the lights in the room flickered violently, plunging me into total darkness for a full 3 seconds. When they returned, my blood froze. The photographs were gone. In their place, neatly arranged in a fan across the bedspread, were fresh photographs. My photographs. Me sitting on the floor, clutching the bundle of images. Me pressing my hands to my ears. Me staring directly into the lens with terror wide across my face. Each one captured from angles that were impossible. Angles where no one had stood. Angles from above, behind, and even within the mirror's warped surface. The mirror. My reflection stared back at me, its smile wider than before. It raised its hand and waved slowly, mockingly, while I stood paralyzed. My stomach churned with dread as I realized the truth: my reflection was not a mirror image at all. It was the photographer. I stumbled to the door, clutching the knob with slick palms, twisting it desperately. It turned, but the door didn't open. Instead, the wood beneath my hand pulsed faintly, warm and alive, like skin. I ripped my hand back, gagging, bile burning in my throat. The silence returned, heavier than ever. I could feel the presence in the room pressing down on me, suffocating, observing, cataloging every move. And then came the voices again, not from the photographs this time, but from the walls themselves. Dozens of voices, all whispering in unison, their words indistinguishable yet heavy with despair. I pressed my hands against the plaster, and for a brief, horrifying second, I felt the outline of fingers pushing back from the other side, as though people were trapped just behind the walls, clawing to get out. My vision swam. My body shook. I was caught between terror and a sickening fascination. Because if these voices belonged to the guests who had vanished, then I wasn't just hearing echoes. I was hearing the fate that awaited me. At some point, I must have blacked out. Whether it was sleep, shock, or something the room did to me, I don't know. But when I came to, the lights were dim, the air colder, and the voices were gone. My notebook lay open beside me, a pen still clutched loosely in my hand. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had dreamed it all. The photographs. The whispers. The figure in the mirror. Maybe exhaustion had twisted my perception. But then I looked at the bed. My photographs were still there, spread neatly across the blanket like a grotesque gallery. Each one caught me in some vulnerable moment, my fear magnified, my despair frozen in time. I gathered them up with trembling hands, intending to destroy them, to tear them into shreds. But when I tried, the paper resisted. It wasn't thick or stiff, it simply refused to tear, as if it weren't made of paper at all. Instead, the image pulsed faintly under my fingers, alive in some unnatural way. The more pressure I applied, the more it pushed back, until I dropped them in disgust. They fluttered to the floor, arranging themselves face up once again. Watching me. I wanted to call someone. To prove that I was still here, still real. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It had power, the screen glowing faintly. For a second, relief surged through me. I dialed a friend, an old colleague from the paper, and pressed the phone to my ear. It rang once. Twice. Then silence. On the third ring, the call connected. I heard breathing, faint and steady. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. Just the slow, deliberate sound of someone exhaling on the other end. Then, after a long pause, a voice. "You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't my friend. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The voice was low, distorted, as though echoing from a cavern. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone, but the voice didn't stop. From the floor, from the tiny speaker, it continued. "We erased the others. You should not exist. But you do. Why do you?" I kicked the phone away, the voice cutting off abruptly as it struck the wall. My chest heaved, panic clawing through me. I staggered to the dresser, staring at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, it wasn't mimicking me. It was sitting calmly at the desk, pen in hand, writing furiously in a notebook identical to mine. My mouth went dry. I checked my notebook again. The words scrawled across its pages weren't mine. They were names. Dozens of them. Hundreds, even. Some neatly written, some scratched desperately into the paper. I flipped frantically through page after page. All names. No explanations. No dates. Just a roll call of the lost. And then I saw it. My own name, written in bold strokes. My breath hitched. The ink was still wet. I stumbled back, the notebook slipping from my grip, and when it hit the floor, the pages fluttered open to reveal something that made my stomach drop. A photograph tucked between the sheets, me, again, but this time not in room 6. No. This was different. This was my apartment. My living room. And in the background, sitting on my couch, was the same skeletal man from the first black and white photo. My knees buckled. I pressed my hands to my face, gasping for breath. It wasn't just this room. Whatever it was, it had followed me home long before I ever set foot in Greystone. In desperation, I dialed another number. My editor this time. A rational voice. Someone who could ground me. The phone rang. Then her voice answered, calm and warm. Relief washed over me, until she said, "Who is this?" "It's me," I rasped. Don't you recognize my voice?" There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "We don't have anyone by that name on staff. You must have the wrong number." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the silence pressing in again, heavier than ever. My editor didn't remember me. Or worse, she never knew me at all. The realization hit like ice in my veins. The process had already begun. I was being erased. My existence was unraveling, thread by thread, beginning with the memories of the people I knew best. I clutched my chest, forcing myself to breathe, when a new sound slithered through the silence. Not whispers. Not laughter. A scratching sound, faint but steady. I followed it, my skin crawling, until I found its source, the walls. The plaster quivered beneath my touch, vibrating with each scrape. Slowly, horrifically, words began to carve themselves across the wallpaper. "Welcome to the list." The letters stretched downward, jagged and raw, as though written by invisible claws. My head spun. My name was in the notebook. My photograph was in the stack. My friends no longer remembered me. I was already theirs. But then, faint, buried beneath the scratching, came that same woman's voice again, trembling, urgent. "Don't let them take you. Fight." I spun around, desperate to find her. The mirror caught my eye. This time, my reflection wasn't alone. Behind it, crowded into the reflection of the room, were dozens of figures. Men. Women. Children. Their faces pale and hollow, their eyes black pits. And all of them were staring directly at me, mouths moving in unison. The glass fogged, words etched from their breath. "We remember." For a long while, I couldn't move. My body pressed against the wall as my eyes locked on the mirror, its surface alive with shifting faces. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of pale forms crowded behind my reflection. They weren't distortions, not tricks of the glass, they were people. Or what was left of them. Their hollow eyes burned into me, and their mouths moved in a frenzy, forming words I couldn't quite hear. My reflection sat motionless in the foreground, its grin fixed and impossibly calm, like the conductor of a chorus of the damned. Then the glass fogged again, breath condensing from nowhere, and words appeared. "Help US." My pulse thundered. My throat tightened. I should have felt terror, but instead a flicker of hope sparked deep inside. If they wanted help, it meant they weren't just passive victims. They still had agency, however faint. They still remembered. I forced my voice out, rough and trembling. "How?" The faces leaned closer, pressing against the glass as though they could push through. Their mouths moved in unison, and this time the sound came, low, muffled, like voices beneath water. Dozens of voices, speaking as one. "Take our place. Or take theirs." I shook my head violently. "I don't understand." The mirror flickered. The reflection of the room warped, deepening, as though the glass itself was stretching into a tunnel. For a heartbeat, I saw flashes, guests being swallowed into photographs, screaming faces trapped behind peeling wallpaper, people erased from family portraits, their absence leaving nothing but blank space. And then, more disturbingly, flashes of the outside world. A man shaking hands with a business partner who stared through him as though he didn't exist. A woman weeping in front of an empty crib, though her arms cradled something unseen. A crowded street where dozens of people moved like ghosts, unnoticed by the living. When the images faded, the mirror settled back into its familiar frame. My reflection leaned forward now, closer than it should have been, whispering a phrase I didn't want to hear but couldn't ignore. Trade. Trade. The realization sank in, heavy and cold. The souls weren't asking me to save them. They were asking me to replace them. Someone had to fill the room's hunger. Someone had to be erased so they could claw their way back into existence. I backed away, shaking my head. No. No, I won't damn someone else to this. The faces rippled in anger, their whispers rising to a hiss. The mirror quaked, a deep vibration that made the glass shiver. Letters formed again on its surface, sharp and jagged this time. You will. The lights flickered. The room's silence cracked, replaced with a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The wallpaper peeled in strips, curling away to reveal faint outlines beneath, human silhouettes pressed into the plaster, their mouths frozen in soundless screams. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the bed, my body shaking. The weight of their gaze pressed into me from every direction. Desperate, I snatched my phone again and dialed my sister's number. It rang. And rang. Finally, a voice answered. Relief surged, until she said, I'm sorry, I don't know who this is. My knees buckled. She didn't remember me. Just like my editor. Just like everyone else. My name was still slipping away from the world, dissolving from every memory it had ever touched. Please, I begged. It's me. It's your brother. You know me. You know me. But the voice on the other end hesitated only a moment before repeating, you have the wrong number. Then the line went dead. Tears burned my eyes. My family, my friends, my identity was already gone to them. The erasure wasn't a threat anymore. It was already happening. I collapsed against the dresser, clutching at its edges, sobbing silently. And then I heard it again. That woman's voice. Clear, urgent, cutting through the whispers of the others. Fight. I forced myself up, trembling, my jaw clenched. How? I shouted at the room. Tell me how. The mirror's surface rippled like water. A single face pressed forward, clearer than the rest. A woman, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but undeniably human. Her mouth moved slowly, deliberately, forming words that scraped across my bones. Erase the room. Erase the room. Before I could process the phrase, the mirror cracked. Not shattered, just a single fracture running from top to bottom, splitting my reflection in two. My doppelganger stared back at me, its smile gone, its eyes black and bottomless. The lights cut out. In the dark, I felt something cold wrap around my wrist. A hand. Too tight, too strong. Another gripped my ankle, yanking hard. I screamed, thrashing blindly. The photographs scattered across the floor began to glow faintly, one by one, as though illuminated from within. And in every glowing frame, I saw myself, not standing, not sitting, but being dragged into the dark by hands I could not see. I don't remember hitting the floor. One moment, hands pulled at me from the dark, and the next, I was sprawled on the carpet, gasping for air, my limbs aching as though I'd been dragged for miles. The lights flickered back on, dim and sickly, casting everything in the color of rotting parchment. My vision swam, and when it steadied, I realized I wasn't in room 6 anymore. The walls had changed. The wallpaper was older, yellowed with age, patterned with faded roses that seemed to bleed at the edges. The bed was gone. The mirror was gone. The photographs scattered across the floor were gone. Instead, I was in a hallway that stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with doors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each marked with a different number, each whispering faintly when I strained to listen. I staggered upright, my body trembling, and turned toward the nearest door. Its brass number plate read 214. Beneath the number, carved deep into the wood, were words that shouldn't have been there. We stayed here. We never left. I backed away, my stomach twisting. The hallway pulsed. Yes, pulsed, like the steady throb of a heartbeat. The lights above dimmed and brightened in rhythm, and I realized with sudden clarity that the corridor was alive. The Greystone Hotel wasn't just a building. It was a body. The wallpaper was its skin. The hallways its veins. The doors its teeth, waiting to bite down and swallow. A voice echoed faintly, carried on the stale air. Not the chorus of whispers this time, not the waterlogged mumbling from the mirror, but something deeper. Older. A voice that belonged to the hotel itself. Do you know how long I've been hungry? I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The voice wasn't outside me, it was inside. In the walls. In the floor beneath my shoes. In the ceiling above. Everywhere at once. I didn't ask to come here, I croaked, my voice cracking. I was just investigating. The ceiling lights buzzed, then dimmed until I stood in near darkness. The voice rumbled again, slow and deliberate. All who come investigate. All who come feed. I spun, panic burning through my chest, and broke into a run. My footsteps echoed endlessly down the hall, the doors blurring past me, numbers repeating themselves as though the hallway was folding back on itself. 214, 310. 6, 214 again. I was running, but I wasn't leaving. The hotel was playing with me. Finally, I stopped, panting, chest heaving. My body felt weak, as though the air itself had been stripped of oxygen. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself, and that was when I felt it, warmth. Not the kind of warmth you'd expect from a sunlit wall, but the feverish warmth of a living body. The wallpaper beneath my palm shifted. And then, impossibly, it breathed. I yanked my hand away with a choked cry. The wall pulsed outward and then inward, like lungs drawing in air. And when I looked closer, I saw that the faded roses in the wallpaper weren't flowers at all. They were faces. Dozens, maybe hundreds, stretched thin, their features warped into petals and stems. Their mouths opened and closed in silent screams as the wall inhaled and exhaled. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. The faces blurred, then shifted again, and I recognized one. My sister's. I pressed my hand over my mouth, fighting a scream. She was smiling faintly, her expression one I remembered from childhood photographs, and then her face melted back into the wallpaper, replaced by another. Then another. The hotel had eaten her memory. It had eaten her. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and my vision darkened at the edges. The walls were breathing faster now, as though excited by my realization, as though savoring my horror. The voice spoke again, louder this time. You are already inside me. There is no outside. There is only me. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block out the voice, but it wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was inside my skull, vibrating through my bones. And then, faintly, beneath the roar of the hotel's words, I heard her again, the woman's voice, the one who had told me to fight. Erase the room. My head snapped up. How? I screamed into the emptiness. Tell me how. The hallway stretched into infinity before me, but one door flickered with a faint, unnatural glow. Its brass number plate didn't hold a number. Instead, letters shifted across its surface, forming words I had seen once already. Erase the room. My heart pounded. My hands shook. I stumbled toward the door, each step heavier than the last, the floor sucking at my shoes as though the carpet had turned to quicksand. The whispering from the other doors grew louder, a chorus of voices begging, mocking, cursing, pleading. The hotel was trying to distract me, to confuse me, to break me before I reached the door. I reached out. My fingers brushed the brass plate, cold and slick like wet skin. The door creaked open just a fraction, releasing a wave of freezing air that reeked of mold and iron. And from the crack in the doorway, a single pale hand slipped through, grasping for mine. I froze, my body shuddering. It wasn't a dead hand. It was alive. Trembling. Desperate. And then I heard the whisper again, clearer than ever. "Help me." The hand gripped mine with surprising strength. Cold, trembling, but unmistakably human. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be another trick of the hotel, a projection, a lure to drag me deeper into its labyrinth. But when the fingers tightened, nails digging into my skin, I felt pain. Real pain. "Please," the voice whispered, closer now, almost in my ear though the lips speaking belonged to whoever waited behind the door. "Don't let go. If you do, it will swallow me again." I pressed my other palm against the door, feeling the wood tremble beneath my touch. It was alive, like the walls, shuddering with each breath. Something didn't want this woman to escape. Something was holding her back. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice ragged, half fury, half terror. Her grip trembled. "I was you once." The words sent a chill down my spine. What does that mean? I was a journalist. I came here years ago. I thought I could expose it. I thought I could write my way out, tell the story before it consumed me. Her voice cracked, and through the sliver of the open door, I saw movement, a strand of dark hair, a pale cheek smeared with dirt. But the hotel doesn't let stories leave. It rewrites them. It rewrote me. I shook my head violently. No, that's not possible. You're... The hand tightened until I winced. "Do you think you're the first to investigate room 6? Do you think you're special?" Her words were sharp, desperate. "This place feeds on people like us. The curious. The ones who pull at threads. The moment you walked through its doors, you weren't a journalist anymore, you were a meal." The hallway groaned, the walls pulsing in outrage at her words. The faces in the wallpaper contorted, mouths opening in silent screams. A rush of air surged down the corridor, foul and cold, pressing against me as if the hotel itself was trying to shove me away from the door. "Then how are you still alive?" I shouted over the rising wind. Her reply was a whisper, barely audible. "Because I refused to disappear. I left part of myself behind. I let it erase my name, my past, my face, but I hid my voice. That's why you heard me. That's why I can still speak." My heart pounded, each beat a thunderclap in my skull. The hotel's voice roared inside me, angry now, booming through my bones. "Do not listen. She is already gone." The woman's fingers shook in mine. "You feel it, don't you? Your memory's slipping, your face fading. You've looked at your reflection, you've seen it vanish. Soon, you'll be nothing. Unless," she hesitated, her breath hitching. "Unless you do what I couldn't. Unless you erase the room." I pressed my forehead against the crack in the door, fighting the suffocating pressure of the hotel pressing down on me. "Tell me how." Her answer was soft, broken. "You must give it something it can't consume. Something it can't erase. It thrives on memory, on identity, on existence. You have to leave it with emptiness." Her hand trembled violently, her nails cutting crescents into my skin. "Erase yourself before it can. Leave nothing for it to feed on." The words twisted inside me like knives. Erase myself? Kill myself? That was what she was saying, give up everything, surrender my very being, to starve the hotel. But then she added, almost too quietly to hear, or trade. That's the other way. Someone else in your place. A new guest. A new story. The hallways darkened until I could see nothing but the faint glow of the door and her pale hand clinging to mine. My throat felt raw, torn between breaths, my mind racing through 1,000 impossible scenarios. Trade my life for someone else's. Bring in another victim. Let the hotel eat them instead. The hotel's voice swelled, furious now, shaking the walls. You are mine. You belong to me. I pressed my head harder against the door crack, whispering fiercely, if you know all this, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you erase yourself? Why are you still here? There was a pause. The kind that feels like the world holding its breath. And then her answer came, hoarse and guilty. Because I was a coward. I couldn't let go of myself. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone else would come. Someone stronger. Someone who could do what I couldn't. I yanked my hand back, shaking, bile rising in my throat. She gasped, her arm jerking as if she were being pulled backward into the darkness behind the door. No, please, don't leave me, she cried, her voice breaking. But I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to slam the door shut, to abandon this woman who claimed to be what I might become. And yet, a terrible thought gnawed at me, what if she wasn't lying? What if she was me, or a version of me, lost years before in a loop of forgotten time? What if this was my fate, playing out again and again? The hotel groaned, walls trembling, floor rippling beneath my feet. Faces in the wallpaper twisted and writhed, mouths stretching in grotesque mockery of speech. The air stank of mold and rot, suffocating me. I reached for the door again. Her hand was gone. In its place, something else pushed through the crack. Not a hand. Not human. Something pale, boneless, slick with moisture. It wrapped around the edge of the door like a worm, pulsating in time with the hotel's heartbeat. And then, in her voice, but twisted, corrupted, the thing whispered, erase yourself, or I will. I stumbled backward from the door, bile rising in my throat as the pale, boneless appendage slithered against the wood, pulsing in sick rhythm with the hotel's heartbeat. My chest heaved, every instinct in me screaming to run, to escape, to find an exit before the hotel could drag me deeper into its gut. The faces in the wallpaper twisted as I backed away, their mouths stretched into grotesque parodies of laughter, teeth clicking against the paper as though they were chewing on my fear. I turned and bolted down the corridor. My legs felt like lead, each step heavier than the last, as though the carpet itself wanted to glue me in place. The hallway stretched impossibly, door after door blurring past me, but no matter how fast I ran, the numbers above the doors kept repeating, 214, 310, 6, always 6. No, I hissed through clenched teeth. Not again. Not this time. I yanked at the walls as I sprinted, clawing at the wallpaper until strips of it tore free, revealing raw plaster beneath. But even that betrayed me, the plaster shifted and reformed, the roses regrowing, the faces staring blankly as though mocking my futile rebellion. At last, I spotted something I hadn't seen before, an exit sign glowing faintly red at the end of the hall. My heart lurched in my chest. The sign flickered, buzzing like a dying insect, but it was there, hope, fragile and electric. I pushed harder, my body screaming, lungs burning with every breath. My shoes slapped against the floor, echoing like gunshots in the suffocating silence. The closer I got, the more I could feel the hotel resisting me, its pulse hammering in my skull, its voice rumbling low, vibrating through my bones. There is no exit. There has never been an exit. You are mine. The words pressed against me like a physical force, slowing my strides, threatening to drop me to my knees. My ears rang, blood pounding, but I forced myself forward. I reached the door beneath the glowing exit sign and slammed my hands against the bar. It resisted for a moment, the metal vibrating under my palms, before giving way with a screech. The door burst open, and blinding light spilled through the frame. Fresh air. Cold. Real. I stumbled out, throwing myself into the brightness, blinking against the glare. My heart hammered as my vision adjusted, and for a moment, I thought I'd made it. I was outside, the night sky stretched above me, stars pricked against the velvet dark. I gasped the air in greedy gulps, the chill stinging my lungs. But then my relief curdled. The street was wrong. Too wide. Too empty. Buildings stretched in warped shapes on either side, leaning unnaturally, their windows blank like blind eyes. The lampposts flickered, and the road beneath my feet rippled as though it were water. And ahead of me, just a few feet away, stood the Greystone Hotel. Its facade loomed impossibly tall, each window glowing faintly like watchful eyes. The entrance yawned wide, doors already open as though waiting for me. The brass number above the arch didn't read Greystone Hotel anymore. Instead, it glowed with a single word, welcome. I staggered back, my mouth dry, my mind rebelling against what I was seeing. I had escaped, or thought I had, but the hotel had simply redrawn the world around me. There was no outside. There was only Greystone. The air shifted behind me. Slowly, I turned. The exit door still stood open, its frame glowing with faint red light. But instead of the endless corridor, room 6 stared back at me. The bed. The mirror. The photographs. All exactly as I'd seen them when I first stepped inside. Waiting. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, no, no. The hotel's voice thundered, filling the empty street, rattling my bones. There is no outside. You are not leaving. You were never meant to leave. The ground trembled beneath my feet, asphalt splitting like cracked skin, shadows spilling from the fissures. The buildings groaned and bent inward, leaning toward me, their walls stretching like arms ready to pull me back inside. I stumbled forward, desperate, frantic. I didn't know where I was going, there was nowhere to go, but my legs carried me anyway. Away from the hotel, away from the exit, away from the truth clawing at the edges of my mind. But the farther I ran, the closer the hotel loomed. Every corner I turned, every street I stumbled down, every desperate sprint ended the same way, the Greystone Hotel waiting for me, its doors open, its windows glowing. And then I saw them. Figures standing in the windows. Dozens of them. Pale, blurred silhouettes pressing their hands against the glass. Their faces were indistinct, smudged like bad photographs, but I felt their eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. Among them, I saw my sister again. And behind her, God help me, I saw myself. I froze in the middle of the street, heart hammering, breath ragged. My own pale reflection stared back at me from the window, lips moving soundlessly. I strained to hear, though I already knew what he was saying. Come back inside. The ground beneath me cracked open, asphalt peeling away like paper, revealing more doors, more rooms, more glowing exit signs that led nowhere. The world was unraveling, folding itself back into the hotel's body. I screamed, though I couldn't hear my own voice over the roar of the Greystone. The lights flickered, the buildings melted, and before I could stop myself, I was standing at the threshold of the hotel once more. The brass plate above the door glowed warmly. This time, it bore my name. The brass plate glowed with a sick warmth, my name etched into it as though it had always belonged there. Letters burned in gold against the dark wood, not room 6, not Greystone Hotel, but my name. I couldn't move. My legs locked beneath me, trembling. To see my name above that door, it was like staring into my own grave, already carved and waiting. My hands shook violently, bile rising in my throat, as the hotel's voice seeped through the air, low and patient now. There has only ever been you. I shook my head, whispering, no, that's not true. I had a sister. Parents. A life. The voice rumbled, almost amused. Do you remember their faces? Their voices? Do you truly remember them? Or do you only recall photographs? The words punched through me like knives. I searched my memory, clawing through the fog. My sister's laugh. My mother's perfume. My father's hand clapping my shoulder. The images came, but they slipped like oil through my grasp. And when I tried to hold them tighter, all I could see were photographs. Stiff poses. Staged smiles. Memories I didn't live, only pictures I'd studied. And then I understood. The hotel hadn't eaten my family. The hotel had created them. Fragments stitched together, illusions of a life outside, given to me so I would feel real enough to feed on. The moment I had stepped into Greystone, there had never been a before. The photographs were bait. The voices were echoes. I had never existed anywhere else. I staggered forward, choking on the revelation. You made me. I was never real. The hotel's voice sighed, almost tender. Now you see. There is no outside. There is no world beyond me. I am the story. You are the page. I stumbled toward the open doors, powerless to resist the pull now. The lobby yawned before me, vast and endless, its chandelier glowing like an eye above, its carpet breathing beneath my shoes. The reception desk waited, the guest book open. I staggered to it, and there it was, page after page of names, all crossed out, all erased into blankness. And at the bottom, in fresh ink, was mine. Already fading. My hands shook as I reached out, fingers grazing the paper. The letters blurred, dissolving into nothing, my name unraveling. My skin prickled, my breath shallow. I looked down at my hands, and saw them blur, too. The lines of my palms smudged, my fingers losing definition. I was fading, unspooling like smoke. No, I whispered, though my voice cracked and thinned, barely audible. I'm still here. I'm still me. The mirrors along the lobby walls rippled, reflecting not me, but dozens of other faces, men, women, children, each one flickering, fading, erased in turn. And among them, I saw her, the woman behind the door. She wasn't screaming now. She wasn't even moving. Just staring at me with empty eyes, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. My knees buckled, and I fell against the desk, the guest book sliding shut with a heavy thud. The sound echoed through the lobby like a coffin lid sealing. The hotel's voice whispered inside my skull, soft and final. You were always mine. You were always me. And then came the last twist of the knife, the final truth. The photographs. The whispers. The faces in the wallpaper. They weren't people the hotel had consumed. They were me. Each face a version of myself, erased and remade, recycled into the endless loop. I hadn't been investigating disappearances, I had been reliving them. Over and over. Each time I came back to room 6, believing I was new, believing I was curious, believing I could escape. And each time, the hotel swallowed me whole and started again. The Greystone Hotel wasn't just alive. It wasn't just a place. It was me. I was its story, endlessly erased, endlessly rewritten. My vision darkened, my body unraveling into threads of smoke and ink. The walls pulsed, the floor throbbed, the chandelier glowed brighter. The hotel inhaled, and I felt myself being pulled into its lungs. In those final seconds, before the last shred of me vanished, I heard the question again, the same one that had drawn me here, the hook that started it all. Would you believe me if I told you there's a hotel room that erases people from existence? And I realized the answer didn't matter. Because once the Greystone had you, there was no one left to believe. The last thing I saw was the brass plate above the door, my name glowing faintly, before it too blurred into nothing. And then I was gone. The journalist was never an outsider investigating disappearances, he was the disappearance, endlessly recycled by the Greystone Hotel. His memories of family, work, and life were only props created by the hotel to make him feel real enough to consume. The Greystone doesn't erase people. It creates them, feeds on them, and rewrites them forever. Would you believe me if I told you there's a hotel room that erases people from existence? Of course you wouldn't. Because you'll never remember I told you.